Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me welcome you to the Polish Research Programme, Another View and Plans for the Future Promoting Conference in Kraków. I welcome you on behalf of the National Science Centre Poland, and I welcome you to the National Science Centre.
W siedzibie Narodowego Centrum Nauki znajdujemy się w samym centrum, w samym sercu NCN-u, a także w sercu Polski, w królewskim stołecznym mieście Krakowie. To wielka szkoda, że przez plagę czy też pandemię, jakkolwiek chcą Państwo nazwać te okropne wirusy, które spowodowały COVID-19, nie możemy spotkać się twarzą w twarz, a ja mogę Państwa powitać tutaj tylko zdalnie. Aczkolwiek zdalnie to jest ten powód, dla którego się dzisiaj spotykamy. A ten powód znajduje się, proszę Państwa, za granicą, w trzech wspaniałych państwach: Islandii, Liechtensteinie i Norwegii. Są to państwa darczyńcy funduszy norweskich i funduszy EOG. Dzisiaj, proszę Państwa, świętujemy fakt, że Polska nie po raz pierwszy jest największym beneficjentem tych funduszy wśród krajów Unii Europejskiej. Polska korzysta z tego wsparcia od 2004 roku, czyli od 17 lat. W tym roku alokacja funduszy wynosi 2,8 miliarda euro, z czego Polska otrzymuje 809,3 miliona euro. A dlaczego spotykamy się, proszę Państwa, w Narodowym Centrum Nauki? Cóż, Narodowe Centrum Nauki jest operatorem programu badania podstawowe. Zatem proszę pozwolić, że przekażę teraz głos panu dyrektorowi NCN-u, profesorowi Zbigniewowi Błockiemu. Bardzo dziękuję, proszę Państwa. To dla mnie wielka przyjemność powitać Państwa podczas wydarzenia poświęconego programowi badania realizowanego w ramach funduszy norweskich i funduszy EOG. Jesteśmy gospodarzami tego wydarzenia, które inauguruje cały ten program. Tak naprawdę to wszystko zaczęło się, proszę Państwa, w czerwcu zeszłego roku, ale z powodów, które wszyscy aż zbyt dobrze znamy, musieliśmy przełożyć w czasie to wydarzenie. Zresztą tak jak wiele innych wydarzeń, mogę tutaj wspomnieć chociażby o Euro 2020 czy też
The National Science Centre is a Polish grant agency funding basic research. As was already mentioned, we are located in Krakow, which is not a typical thing in Poland. So unlike other central Polish institutions, that almost all of them are in the capital of Warsaw, we are committed to support excellence in science by selecting best scientists and their research projects in a competitive, transparent, expert-driven evaluation system. International cooperation is a very important part of our activities, and being the operator of the basic research program of the European Economic Era and Area and Norway Grants is one of them. Today, after the official part of the event, we will have in particular presentations of our grantees, and in the second part of the event, an international panel of experts chaired by the former president of NCN Council, Professor Małgorzata Kosowska, will discuss very up-to-date issue, namely that of open science. NCN is very committed to this issue. Let me mention that together also in particular with our Norwegian partner, the Research Council of Norway, we are among founding members of the so-called Coalition S, which is an alliance of many European grant agencies. Now it's even many participants from outside of Europe that is aiming at and really implementing already a real open access policy so that the open access is a reality for publicly funded research. I'm also, well, I said the event is remote, but I'm happy to mention that 3 of our Polish experts in the panel will be here with us in person, whereas the 3 international experts will take part in it online. But this will be the second part of the event. So finally, let me thank everybody who has contributed to make the EEA and Norway Grants a success. Of course, first of all, the donors, the countries of Norway, Iceland, and Liechtenstein, but also the institutions cooperating with us closely, Polish ministries responsible for development funds and also for science, our Norwegian partner, the Research Council of Norway, the Financial Mechanism Office in Brussels, the Norwegian Embassy in Warsaw, which has also been very supportive. And let me also thank in particular the program committee consisting of 5 renowned scientists from Poland and Norway, ensuring that the most important funding decisions are taken by researchers and not bureaucrats like myself. I am also very grateful for everybody at NCN working on the program, including the team led by Dr. Marzena Oliwkiewicz-Miklasińska. Most importantly, I want to thank the scientists, some of whom we will listen to today. I wish all of you an interesting event. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you very much for those kind words, and especially thank you very much for having us here. This is absolutely a splendid place. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pity you cannot see it. The rooms are named after natural satellites, and when you just enter the lobby, you feel you are in the center of science.
Yeah, I hope we can all meet here in the near future.
Certainly. We certainly have to. Definitely as soon as possible. Well, you know, you just enter the place and you feel like somebody coming from around the corner saying, "May the force be with you," or I don't know, live long and prosper, perhaps. Well, speaking of prosper, may I now turn to His Excellency Anders H. Eide, the Norwegian ambassador to Poland, representative of the donors, to address us on the subject of EEA and Norway grants.
Dear Ministers, Director, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this opportunity to address the EEA and Norway Grants Research Conference. Poland and Norway have been cooperating on bilateral research for more than 15 years now. And this program that we have is actually one of the biggest of its kind in the world. And with 110 million euro in allocation, it is certainly the second largest of all the programs under the EEA and Norway grants in Poland. Throughout the years, our bilateral research cooperation has produced some outstanding results, not only in terms of bilateral research, but the cooperation has also served as a basis for Polish and Norwegian researchers to compete and participate in projects on the international and European arenas. I strongly believe that in order to tackle the greatest challenges of our time, such as the climate change crisis, the loss of biodiversity, or pandemics like the one we are experiencing, there is really no way without international cooperation. These challenges are simply too great to be faced alone, and it's only through strong commitment and international cooperation that we can prevail and that we can succeed. So with that, I wish you a fruitful conference and all the best of luck with the onward implementation of this important EEA and Norway Grants research program. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that splendid presentation, Excellency. Now I have the honor to invite Waldemar Buda, Secretary of State in the Ministry of Funds and Regional Policy of the Republic of Poland, and requests the Ministry's perspective on the same subject.
Witam na konferencji poświęconej programowi Badania Podstawowe, który jest realizowany z funduszy norweskich.
It is implemented using the EEA and Norway Grants funds. Let me welcome the National Science Centre, the organizer of this event. For the first time, they are the operator of those programs. It's their role today. Now the pandemic made it impossible to do certain things last year. And yet, despite all these problems that we're facing these days due to the pandemic, they have managed to announce and resolve 3 calls, which is quite impressive. As a result, today we can see and learn about tangible impact that this scheme has had. But the basic research program is an opportunity to exchange experience and knowledge at an international forum, naturally. Researchers from abroad have an opportunity to work here in Poland, and those people, when they come here, they strengthen the scientific capacity of our research centers. In the last few years, we have seen how important a role science plays in our lives. It is thanks to scientists that we have been able to overcome this pandemic. 51 million euros have been assigned to the basic research program, largely because of that. This is the only such step where we are taking every effort to support the Polish science. The applied research program also has been heavily funded. Similar undertakings are very much needed, and we see that because the calls have been quite popular. In the recent call, we have received over 300 applications. Only some can receive funding, naturally. We do hope that the scientific teams and the partnerships that have developed will form a great value. And now, let me say that I do hope that the National Science Centre and all these projects will be successful. And I do hope that all that work will be translated into more successes to come in the future. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for this very succinct presentation. And now, let us move to another keynote, a brief précis on Polish science and basic research from Wojciech Murdzek, Secretary of State at the Ministry of Education and Science.
Szanowni Państwo, bardzo dziękuję za zaproszenie.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your invitation to this special event. This is the beginning of an important undertaking. What are we talking about? This is the beginning of a new program, and we see a new influx of money coming from the Norway grants, and we highly appreciate. Basically, it's quite empowering. And I'm really happy to see that the National Science Centre will play an important role here. They are quite experienced player there, and they will be working on the distribution of that money. We're talking about tens of millions of euros after all. So this is not an insignificant amount of money in anybody's book. So we are talking about promoting basic research, and we see that without basic research there is no development. You cannot even think about implementation. This is where it all begins. The better projects get noticed and financed, the better the prospects for researchers, for scientists, the better the outcome of all that work, in the form of various scientific achievements and publications. Another thing that I'm happy about is that this is a tool to build and improve the international position of Poland, which is something we all care about. There is this small grant scheme too, and that makes it possible for foreign scientists and researchers who might want to work here and with us. That might result in reinforced contacts, bonds, networking, and it should have a very positive impact. We'll be happy to follow what happens there, and we hope that the best of projects actually win. And I hope that the funds will be well processed and well used, and I hope that this will be an important stage in the development of the basic research. These are our hopes. However, when I'm saying that we hope to see that, it's basically a foregone conclusion because the operator is an experienced entity, so I have no doubt that they'll be successful.
Thank you very much for those wishes, Minister, and thank you very much for this informative contribution. Let us now turn to Norway again and ask Mari Sudlitveit of RCN, that is Research Council of Norway, to discuss the cooperation between the Polish and the Norwegian research centers.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Director Blocky, dear friends, thank you for this opportunity to greet you here today as the new Director General of the Research Council of Norway. My name is Mari Sudlitveit, and I'm greeting you here from my own living room just south of Oslo, working from home, as I'm sure many of you also still do. And I really sincerely hope that we can meet again face to face quite soon. The Research Council of Norway has been actively involved in Polish-Norwegian cooperation supported by the EEA and Norway Grants for more than a decade. Starting with 22 projects funded by the Polish-Norwegian Research Fund from 2007, followed by another bigger program from 2012, which supported 75 bilateral research projects. We're now again involved in the third edition, which has not one but two programs for Polish-Norwegian bilateral research projects. Our role of donor program partner, which is an advisory function, provides us at RCN a perfect opportunity to develop our cooperation with the program operators, as well as support Norwegian participants in the program. Basic research has been an important element of Polish-Norwegian cooperation from the start, so we were very pleased to see the National Science Centre as the program operator of the new program for basic research from 2018. By now, we've had 3 years to establish close cooperation and have learned to appreciate the professionalism and commitment of our colleagues in Poland. We are confident that we share with our Polish partners the belief in the crucial importance of high-quality, international, curiosity-driven research. The science-based knowledge, as well as scholarship informed by critical approaches, are crucial for the development of wealthy, democratic, sustainable, just and equitable societies. Polish scientists have a long-standing presence and strong tradition for polar research, in particular around the Svalbard or Spitsbergen archipelago. But this is not the only area where Polish and Norwegian research interests coincide, as we've seen both in the wide range of high-quality applications to the corals, and which is also reflected in the topics of the projects supported by the Basic Research Programme. EEA and Norway Grants are not the only context where our paths cross and meet. RCN and NCN are active in Science Europe, and both our institutions are members of Coalition S, the coalition of research funders joining forces to promote open access to scholarly publications through the so-called Plan S. Open access to research publications has long been an objective for Norway, and my predecessor at the head of the research, as head of the Research Council of Norway, Mr. John Arne Røttingen, he actively participated in the formulation of Plan S, which enters into force from this year. I look forward to continuing this work, of course, and I hope to do so in close cooperation with my Polish colleagues. And therefore, I would like to particularly applaud NCN's commitment to use the EEA and the Norway Grants funding to explore and pilot a more proactive policy for open science. And we look forward to the panel debate later here today. And last but not least, I would like to extend warm greetings to all project promoters and partners, to all researchers and staff involved in the projects, both the Polish and Norwegian sides. And I wish you all the best in your work and our common pursuit of a sustainable future for Europe and for our planet.
Thank you very much for all these greetings, Madam. Thank you also for mentioning open access. This is a subject to which we will devote a whole panel today with 6 eminent experts. And now, let me turn to Professor Jacek Kuźnicki, serving as the President of the Council of the NCN, to present the 6th and the final of today's keynotes.
Good afternoon. I would like to ask for the presentation. Yes, it's already there. So, once again, good morning, and it's my great pleasure to be a part of this event and to participate in this very interesting event because of my personal reasons. Here I am as a president of the National Science Center Council, but my scientific career started in Norway about 50 years ago. And I would like to share some personal touch with this presentation with you. So, I went to Spitsbergen in 1971 as a first-year biology student with the idea to collect some samples from the Barents Sea. And I took with me a Russian camera, a regular tape movie, to take the pictures. And I'm going to show you several screen prints from this movie. So the quality is very bad, but you can see that I was really there and I experienced a lot. So this is the ship, the scientific ship on which I was at this time. And the first time I put my foot on Norwegian soil was in Harstad. And you can imagine how impressive for me to see this beautiful town after the gray times in the communistic Poland at the beginning of 70s. And then you can see some of these print shots from the movie, which I took during this trip through the Norwegian fjords and in Harstad. You can see also my suit as a scientist there. And also you can see that I had a lot of hair during those times, which during my 50 years of scientific career was losing slowly. And finally, this was not that's the beginning of my scientific career, because the next time, as a student of 5th year, just before starting my PhD study, I went to the Institute of Nutrition in Oslo to do a volunteer work as an intern to studying brown adipose tissue. This is the tissue which we don't need when it is heat and it's hot, but this is the tissue used by animals and people to protect against cold. But during 1976, there was a wave of heat throughout Europe, and I remember that our lab in the middle of lunchtime was going to the nearby lake to swim. And I also have memories of the tastes of the very good food in Norway, including brown cheese. Coming to the main conclusion of the main topic of today's event is that we at NCN has an ambition to achieve several major goals. One is to have many good
scientists collaborating with our colleagues in Norway, and to not only to initiate such collaboration, but to continue it even when the funding is finished. Second, we hope that scientists will be able to concentrate on the science only thanks of the great support of the administration of NCN staff. And finally, we hope that thanks of this funding and this collaboration, we can make Polish science more visible in the world. We had 3 programs, Greek, Pulse, and Idea Lab, and you can see how popular these programs were, because not only 300 applications, more than 300 applications were to the Greek, but there were almost 100 scientists applying during the difficult COVID time to the Pulse, and more than 200 people applied for Idea Lab. This shows how popular EEA and Norwegian grants programs are, and we can only say only 9% people were successful, for instance, in Greek programs. And I believe that continuation and expanding of these programs is a good for science in Poland, but also for science in Norway and for European and world science. So now, saying that, I think that we should use something which we use on the ship while starting after taking the samples. That is full steam ahead with the programs, with Norwegian programs. And as you can see, and I hope that my colleagues who benefited from Norwegian programs will, in few years or many years ahead, will be able to say, like me saying, that it was a good start having the collaboration with Norwegian friends. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. Especially thank you very much for all the information that you have shared with us, all the numbers. They are really impressive. And the beginning of your presentation really made me pine for the fjords. Well, let's now move to the content presentations, or as you have said, full steam ahead. We will have 4 presentations, the first discussing basic research program as such, and the following 3 selected projects funded from the 3rd edition of EEA and Norway Grants. I'd like to invite Ms. Marzena Oliwkiewicz-Miklesińska of NCN to present the basic research program.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to present with you a short overview of our basic research program. The history of our program had started in 2016 or even earlier, when the management of our agency made effort to establish NCN as the program operator in the next edition of Norway Grants. Thanks to support of the former Ministry of Science, these efforts have successfully ended. The Norway Grants are the very effective and one of the most European aid programs, and Poland is the main beneficiary of this aid. With total allocation of almost 3 billion euro, the program offers the support for economy and societies of 13 involved countries from Central, Southern Europe and also from Baltic states. The research program is the second one, according to allocation, among the 11 Polish programs operated in the 3rd edition of Norway Grants. The research program is divided into 2 components, basic research program and applied research program. And the operator of this second applied program is our twin agency, National Center for Research and Development. I want to present you the main milestones of the history of our research program. And this history began in December 2017, when the Memoranda of Understanding had been signed and this begin to start the third edition of Norway Grants in Poland. 2 years later, in June 7, 2019, the research of program agreement allowed us to announce our 2 main calls, Greek and ID Lab, and the launching of these calls was precisely 2 years ago. Our last of planned calls was launched in March 2020, and it was Pulse Call for Mobility. And first results of our main calls, Greek and ID Lab, was presented to public in April 2020. In the half of December previous year, we published the results of Mobility Pulse Call. This slide presents information which Professor Kuźmicki presented a few minutes ago, so I move to the next one. I want to underline that scientific quality of all application which we received in Greek and Pulse Call was absolutely wonderful, and the high quality of these proposals was the reason that our program committee decided to put 19 projects on waiting list in the case of Greek call and 10 projects on the waiting list in the Pulse Call. In the case of the Pulse Call, in March, April, and May this year, we published 3 additional ranking lists. Important program dates during our program was starting of the project in September and October 2020. It was for Greek and ID Lab projects. This project financed research conducted by bilateral Polish-Norwegian research teams. All projects from ID Lab and Greek calls will end in October or January 2024, but it is possible to prolongate the lasting of these proposals till the end of April 2024. Which is also the date of the final eligibility for the projects. The deadline for publishing research results from all projects conducted under Basic Research Program is end of June 2024. 38 research entities in Poland was the winners of our calls, and you can see that the best winners are, of course, our best universities. It means University of Warsaw and Jagiellonian University. And the third one is the Institute of Oceanology of Polish Academy of Science. The rest of grants goes to different scientific centers in many academic cities in Poland. According to our Norwegian partners in ID Lab and Greek calls, 19 Norwegian institutions were beneficiaries of our program, and the main grantee of our Greek and ID Lab projects are University of Oslo, with 10 research projects conducted by researchers representing this institution. The second one is the Norwegian Institute of Science and Technology in Trondheim, with 7 research projects conducted under ID Lab and Greek call. I want also present you the plans for nearest future. We still waiting for official decision of donors concerning the allocation for Greek coal. It was expected that at least 5 or 6 proposals from waiting list will be financed thanks to this additional allocation from the reserve fund. In the last quarter of this year, we want to start monitoring and controlling process of selected projects after the first year of their implementation. And also, with the end of the year, we start to planning study visits in Poland and Norway under bilateral fund. And we hope that after return to normality, not in COVID circumstances, we can visit the researchers both in Polish and Norwegian research centers. And involvement of the program committee and our donors partner will be very appreciated in this task. Also, in the second half of this year, we will start to planning the new call for the unspent money from EEA financial mechanism. And we have some ideas for this allocation. One is, for example, small grant scheme for young researchers for preparing to applications in European and European Research Council calls for proposals. And the second, our idea is predefined project concerning supporting of polar research, because polar research is the topic of the great importance for both partners in our program. Support of Research Council of Norway and the program committee in all planned activities is greatly welcome. Finally, I want to show you slogans for both Norway grants in this edition and motto of our agency, National Science Center. And this is acting as a program operator. We are working together for a green, competitive and inclusive Europe, parallelly performing for Polish research. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. You might have been discussing basic research, but the presentation was very complex. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, and let me now tempt you to a presentation of the first of the 3 projects that we will introduce to you today. It is part of the Greek call for Polish-Norwegian research projects, and it operates under the title Poles Together, Missing Links Between Arctic and Antarctic Early Earth Records. As a Pole, I love the pun in the name, and may I ask now Professor Monika Kusiak to take the floor.
Hello, everyone. First of all, I would like to say I really am happy and I feel honored of being invited here by NCN. And I'm really happy to have this opportunity to say a few words about the Poles Together project, which Institute of Geophysics leads together with University of Oslo. And I have to say that this title, Poles Together, having double meaning. Well, in this case, as you might imagine, as you can see, it's Arctic and Antarctic, North and South. And within the frame of this project, what we would like to learn, what we'd like to know and recognize is what were the processes at the early Earth. Early Earth, so why polar? Please take a look on this arrow. The blue arrow is the time frame in the geological scale, starting from about 4.5 billion years ago, at the beginning of the Earth, till the end of Archean, 2.5 billion years ago, end of Archean. And then what you can see here, at the very beginning, we have only some really, not that many grains of mineral zircons, which are 4,460 years ago, the oldest grains on Earth, and they occur in small outcrops called Jack Hills in Western Australia. No rock record. The oldest rocks on Earth are about 4 billion years ago. They come from northern Canada, from Acasta, orthognaths, and this 4 billion years ago is the magic border in geological scale time frame between Hadean, from Hades, Hell time, till early Archean. What you can see on this picture, that some parts of these Eoarchean, early Archean rocks come from Antarctica, Greenland, and Labrador. So, why polar? Yes, here is the map of the world, and what you can see, this with red dots, we have some areas where all these rocks on Earth occur, but the circles are areas of our interest. And here, within the frame of this project, we would like to combine the knowledge of Polish scientists, the knowledge of working in Antarctica and Labrador, with the knowledge of our Norwegian partner of work in Greenland. And now, as you can see, to get to this area is not only matter of money, which of course is as well, but extremely difficult logistic. It is why these early Earth processes are still really not known very well. An additional level of difficulties is that the knowledge about this we know only from the tiny mineral zircon, which is zirconium silicate. And this is the only mineral now known for mineralogists, which was dated for ages older than 4 billion years ago. Well, now I can tell you that Marilyn Monroe was wrong, saying that diamonds are forever. No, girls, zircons are forever. This is the only mineral which survived all hellish time from the beginning of the Earth. Additionally, this zircon has some really, really great features because it contains isotopes of uranium, thorium, and lead. These isotopes, they allow us to constrain time, to calculate time from the geochronology, from the radiogenic clock. And as well, we have isotopes of uranium, lutetium, and hafnium, which can tell us some words about geochemistry. This graph on the left, you can see in the center, of course, this is the center of my life, rock samples. So these rock samples, once they are collected, they are measured by various methods. Going to the bottom of this graph, the black squares, this is kind of documentation methodology. But then again, with this orange, we have instruments which are mass spectrometers where we can measure really isotopes. And again, here is this combination of knowledge and talents and accessibility to the laboratory which we have between Poles and Norwegians. So we Polish scientists have experience in working in SIMS and ICP-MS methodologies which are written on the left and right, and our Norwegian partner is a leader of the TIMS laboratory in Oslo, which I do not have much experience with, and I hope this is why we can succeed within the frame of this project, because our knowledge and experience is compatible. And let's hope having this double triangular Bermuda Triangle, once with the field areas, Greenland, Labrador, and Antarctica, and another one with methodology, SIMS, ICP-MS, and TIMS, we can succeed. So, as I told you, we would like to know something about early Earth processes. So we set up 3 objectives: to know about time, to recognize the age of this oldest crust, to find out something about the composition, geochemical composition, and maybe to constrain some models. And as well, of course, being geochemist employed in the Institute of Geophysics, I couldn't help myself and set up secondary objectives, geophysical one, to test paleogeographic reconstruction. So at the end, hopefully, we will know if at the very, very early time of our Earth history, we had some supercontinent called temporary Tsakia from the Inuit language. And if really we will find out that the rock record of samples from Greenland, Labrador, and Antarctica is as old as we can infer from some very, very little knowledge what we have now. Within the frame of this project, is many people involved. At the top, you have me and Lars from Oslo and our other colleagues. As well, we already set up steering committee between Polish and Norwegian partner. Now, I would like to tell you a few words about our technical things and some troubles we got and how we were able to get out of them. Of course, every one of us faced pandemic period. So when we are writing risk assessment, none of us, when we were writing the project, none of us even thought about pandemic. So we just set up few possible risks, field analysis, data interpretation, not getting data as we got, and personal conflict. And I can tell you, we had experienced all this risk except of personal conflict. This is Gantt chart, like general, every one of you saw this one. And at the beginning, of course, we could not go to the field. So we were very, very lucky of having access to the samples which were already collected earlier. And in this graph, blue boxes are what we did, and green, what we hope to do. And as you can see, field trip to Labrador, we need to move to season 2022. But we still hope that soon, this season, we can go to Greenland. Of course, we are prepared for having quarantine. Well, but what I know by now, in Greenland, it's possible to have quarantine in a tent. So we are ready to spend 10 days in a tent and maybe do some work around Nuuk Airport too. Sample preparation. Yeah, this was another thing. Because of COVID, we could not get to the samples anywhere. Non-lab could help us. But because within the frame of the project, we already planned to set up microscopy, so it is what we did. This was planned without any troubles. But as well, we moved some money and we bought rock crusher and shaker, and we were able to be by ourselves, and we are doing things by ourselves now, not using another laboratory. As analysis, geochronology and geochemistry, some samples are already in the University of Oslo in Lars. They are analyzed. Some samples I was able to already analyze. We spend much more money for sample shipping now, except of going by ourselves. But this is something what we can do and how we can do. We still are waiting. I mean, our geophysical work is ahead of us. And as well, data interpretation is something difficult because we got completely different data from our first set of sample, which we imagine. So what we did, I will show you just in a minute. However, I have to tell you that despite all of these problems which we faced, I'm really, really very happy to show you that we reached our first milestones, which was the first release of scientific results. So we were able to submit a paper, and just 2 days ago as well, we submitted 4 conference abstracts. And these are the results which we got. So this comes from Antarctica, from this part which you can see on the map, the Napier complex, where we were sure we will get rocks as old as 3.6 billion years ago. And instead we got rocks which were 2.7 billion years ago and 2.5 billion years ago, 1 billion years younger than what we accepted. Where anyways, we were able to interpret completely different things which we planned, and we still were able to prepare a manuscript which was submitted with my PhD student as the first author to Precambrian Research for 200 points journal. So please keep your fingers crossed that it's published. But Did we really have this supercontinent in 3.6 billion years ago? I don't know, but hopefully in 3 years, I will be able to tell you more. Thank you for your attention, and I invite you to take a look into our webpage, Post Together, IGF EDUPL, where you can have information in Polish, English, and Norwegian, and you can monitor what we are doing and how we are doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and fingers crossed for your supercontinent. So poles apart are no longer poles apart, but are poles together.
Poles together, yes.
Fantastic.
Let's hope poles will be
Thank
together.
you very much. Thank you very much for the content and for the flair with which you present. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, let's now proceed to another project. It is also part of Greek call, and believe it or not, it is much closer related to language, which is close to my heart as a linguist. It is called Polish and Norwegian Language and World Knowledge Development in Mono and Multilingual Children. May I invite here Professor Eva Hamann and Professor Nina Graham-Garman.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank to the organizers for inviting us to present our project. We are now really moving to another topic quite far from early Earth and geophysics. We are moving to psycholinguistics, a combination of psychology and linguistics. Our project is financed by the Greek program within the domain of humanities and social sciences. As you see, we are both together two principal investigators from Poland and from Norway. This is just to prove that we really like to collaborate.
Absolutely. Today we'd like to tell you the story about our team and how we came about to apply for the grant. Then we will present our project goals, the studies we plan to conduct, and what we hope to get out of them. Finally, we will quickly summarize some of the obstacles we have met before we end on a positive note. The project is a collaboration between the University of Warsaw, University of Oslo, and Oslo Metropolitan University. We are now 16 members in the project team, but this number is constantly growing.
We were asked by the organizers to tell you all the story of our project, and I must say it has been quite long, but I promise we will make it short here. So how did it happen? Most of the members of the team, at least the core team, have known each other for almost 10 years now. We have a history of joint publications and a history of joint grant submissions, which were mostly rejected, except for one Star Wars project, which we got the grant for from the NCN on the third try. So when we got to know about the Greek call and decided to apply, we were fully aware that our chances were very low, but nonetheless we decided to make a project of our dreams. So everybody put into the project the ideas he or she dreamt of. When we got the news that we not only got the grant, but that we were the first on the ranking list, we all were totally shocked. We were so used to rejections before. So now I can only say it's worthy to have dreams. I will now tell you about our project goals, and then I will very shortly, briefly present you the 5 studies we plan in our project. Almost all the members of the team were previously involved in research on child multilingualism, so this is the main topic of our project. However, Here we also wanted to explore cultural differences between Poland and Norway, and thus we also consider monolingual populations in both countries. We will present our goals, as I said. First of all, we want to check whether we may enhance early bilingual development by supporting parents. So we ask ourselves, will the multilingual child benefit from the expecting parents being trained to enrich and language environment of the child? We also want to establish measures of bilingual development considering its heterogeneity and multiple internal and external factors influencing the development. So we are asking what factors and in what way are influencing the developmental trajectories in multilingual children's language. We also ask how are lexical processing and vocabulary outcomes related to each other. We also would like to better understand how educational and cultural settings may affect children's understanding of nature. So we ask how do differences in culture, experience with nature, pedagogical environment, and language influence understanding and reasoning about living things. We've planned 5 studies starting from the very early stage where we want to make an intervention study with pregnant parents, training them in enhancing language environment of the babies. Then we want to make 2 norming studies of existing tools, Communicative Development Inventory, CDI, and also the norming study of the tool for preschool children, cross-linguistic lexical tasks. We are also interested in language processing, how children's brains are activated in the situation when they understand words in both of the languages. Finally, our study on understanding and reasoning about living things is related to the differences in educational settings in Poland and Norway. It's really interesting how different attitudes people have in Poland and in Norway towards nature. I must say I love the Norwegian attitudes toward nature. In particular, this is just very quick information about one of our tools, cross-linguistic lexical task. We designed this task in our previous collaboration using a unique procedure which takes into account language specificity, but the procedure itself is universal across languages. These tasks are now available for 30 languages, but norms are not yet done in any of the languages. So we need this for diagnosis, for clinical use, but also for further research.
We hope that several groups of people may benefit from our studies. First of all, we're trying to make participation fun and useful by creating game-like assessment tools for children. The CLT is one example of that, and offering webinars for multilingual parents. Secondly, researchers working with language development will benefit from the work we do on developing and norming the assessment tools, CLTs and CDIs. And we also think that the Polish-Norwegian community, as well as parents to multilingual children in general, practitioners like preschool teachers and healthcare nurses, as well as policymakers may benefit from our findings on multilingual development. Through this project, we hope to achieve a better understanding of typical and atypical mono and multilingual development. With the norm tools, we will have the possibility of more accurate assessment of lexical development, especially in multilingual children. And hopefully, we will also get a better understanding of the factors influencing language and reasoning development in young children in various linguistic and cultural contexts.
Just a quick glimpse on project reality right now. I must say we haven't predicted pandemics as many of other researchers, and this situation was really, really difficult for us. Actually, we gained something also, because our regular meetings started already in pandemics, and we instantly realized that we need a lot of online meetings, and pandemics only help us in making this. But we also had to redesign most of our studies, which was additional and unexpected work, because we first wanted to test children face to face, but we realized it may be not possible. So we redesigned the procedure to be possible online. Although some studies have to be conducted in the lab, for example, the EEG study with brain activation. We had so far very good communication with the NCN, but we also experienced extremely demanding formalities. Very long procedures for buying equipment, for hiring postdocs, and what more, we had also unexpected challenges. For example, our 2 calls for one postdoc position at University of Warsaw were closed without outcome, and possibly the same is just now happening at Oslo Met. So we are figuring out new solutions to invite more people to the team, which we really need. But to give you an optimistic view on the project right now, it looks like the team is now really used to new conditions, with all these online meetings of the whole team and subgroups really meeting every week. And we are all very highly motivated to proceed with our studies online in a different format. And we are all convinced that we will be not only able to provide the results of the basic research, shedding new light on developmental trajectories of the multilingual children, but we also hope to be able to translate our results into the field. So, thank you very much. Dziękujemy za uwagę.
It's been fascinating, not only for a linguist, but also it has been extremely fascinating for someone who deals with projects, how tough work it is to run such a project, especially in the pandemic time. Thank you very, very cordially for that. That we have all earned a coffee break, not only the interpreters. Ladies and gentlemen, this coffee break is definitely very well deserved. And I leave you with the music of Edvard Grieg, the greatest of Norwegian composers. And let's meet again at 12:30 Central European Time. Hello after the break. I believe that all of us are already back to our flickering screens, still the whole of the Mountain King resounding between our ears. Well, I also hope you've turned your eyes towards the sun and seen some green outside. Now we are back after the break, and I hope we've all had a drink of our choice. I've had some tea as an English speaker, and tea here at NCN is absolutely delicious. But let's now pass to something very important, namely the panel discussion that's going to be not only fantastic food for thought, but also proof that distance and technology cannot deter creative minds from meeting. We are all here, although some of us are here physically and others are remotely, and the technology, as I've been assured, works. Let's talk about a crucial subject. We have 6 panelists, and 3 of them were born to the Polish language. Well, now that you see them, you can be sure that for none of them, English is the mother tongue, but we will still communicate in our dear lingua franca. However, those of you who choose the Polish version are welcome to continue to interpretation provided by Ximena Plater-Zyberg and Bartosz Krajka. Now, this panel will be followed by a questions and answers session, so please take notes and share them through the chat function. We've already opened that. As soon as the discussion is finished, which is around 1:30 p.m. Central European Time, your questions will be asked to the members of the panel. And the distinguished members of this panel are Małgorzata Kosowska, who is here in the studio, Andrzej Jajszczyk, former director of the NCN, also here in the studio, Arend Kuster, connecting with us remotely, Sabina Leonelli, also connecting remotely, Marek Michalewicz, here with us in the studio, and Johan Rurik, also connecting remotely. Ladies and gentlemen, the panel.
Thank you very much for a nice introduction. Welcome everyone at the expert panel about open access, open science and open access in particular, organized by the National Science Center. My name is Małgorzata Kosowska. I'm a professor in psychology at the Jagiellonian University. I'm former president of the Scientific Council of the National Science Center, currently head of an Open Data Advisory Board attached to the Ministry of Education and Science. I'm very honored and pleased to moderate this panel that is dedicated to extremely important and time topic. Our highly distinguished panelists have great expertise in open science in general and open access in particular. In fact, they represent all stakeholders, I mean researchers, funding agencies, publishers, all responsible for implementing open access. Thus in the panel, I'm sure all these perspectives will be represented. Very shortly, I would like to introduce my guests just to demonstrate that they are really very experts in the domain. In alphabetical order, Andrzej Jajszczyk, professor at AGH, University of Science and Technology in Kraków, former and in fact the first head of the National Science Center, currently vice president of the Scientific Council of European Research Council. A very important body, and we are looking forward for your views and opinions. Arend Kuster, Director of Academy Affairs in Springer Nature, based in Berlin. He has been working in the publishing industry for over 25 years as an international senior executive with deep experience in STM business strategy, sales and marketing, and academic and professional journal development. Sabina Leonelli, Professor of Philosophy and History of Science at the University of Exeter, co-director of the Center for the Study of the Life Sciences and leader of the governance strand of the Institute of Data Science and Artificial Intelligence. She's also a Plan S ambassador. Marek Michalewicz, director of the Interdisciplinary Center for Mathematical and Computational Modeling, ICM in short, at the Warsaw University, and affiliated the Institute of Advanced Computational Sciences at the Stony Brook University in the US. He has been involved in computational physics, science, and supercomputing for the last 40 years. ICM, the institution he is running, is a key player in open science in Poland. It promotes concept, ideas, good practices of open science, runs several nationwide online services and platforms, and on behalf of the ministry negotiates open access contracts with publishers. And finally, Johan Rurik, Executive Director of Coalition S and a Professor of Linguistics at Leiden University. He is the Editor-in-Chief of the Fair Open Access Journal. It's titled Glossa, a Journal of General Linguistics. He also is a founding member and president of the FAIR Open Access Alliance and Linguistic in Open Access. He's a member of the Academia Europea. I would like to thank a lot for accepting our invitation, willingness to share your opinions on open access. Our experts were asked to share the views on many aspects of open access. We understand here open access as a set of principles and a range of practices through which research outputs, results are distributed online free of cost and or without other access barriers, such as barriers to copying or reusing. And it's absolutely clear that although open access was a topic of high priority in the scientific world and beyond, and has been discussing for many years, it's not fully implemented yet, and many obstacles are preventing it from being fully implemented. These obstacles are not only technical, but also legal, financial, and most importantly, maybe not most, but I think that's most importantly, psychological. What is more, Plan S, an initiative for open access publishing called by some members of our community as a radical or bold plan, shaking up the scientific world in a good and a bad sense. And to remind you, Plan S requires that from 2021 scientific publication, the results from research funded by public grants must be published in compliant open access journals on platforms. National Science Center joint plan as at the very beginning, and this plan is supported by European Commission and until recently by a European Research Council. Plan S is, however, criticized for being problematic in many aspects, and the question arises if it requires serious discussions and in some cases maybe a rethink. Thus we thought that is a great opportunity to hear the experts' opinion on that. We prepared 4 questions for our experts, and after that we'll have time for questions from the audience. So if you are ready, we can start. The first question is very general. It is a kind of warm-up question. It is the question about the role of open access in current research communication. More specifically, we'd like to know if open access is really a more efficient research communication model than the traditional ones, in which aspects it's more or less efficient, and also what's the impact of open access on researchers and beyond. And I thought that maybe we start from Andrzej Jajszczyk, and in alphabetical order we just finish the round.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. Open access is a hot issue, we all know, and it's when we look at the model and open access versus subscription model, Poland probably is a very special case, because I recently heard at an American event that Poland is leader in open access publications in Europe. So about 50% of all publications published by Polish researchers are in open access. So this means that it plays a role. But of course there are several open issues, especially those issues related to the quality, I think. So because sometimes we say that open access is something that is free, but we all know that there is no free lunch, so somebody has to pay for publication costs. And also one of the arguments in favor of open access, of course, is that it allows, say, general public or general society to study research papers, which is a little bit tricky because in, say, recent studies, it was shown that in Poland 40% of adults don't fully understand what they read, 30% does not understand anything, and about 10% does not read at all. So I cannot imagine that those people who don't read, say, some popular newspapers, they switch to reading very specialized research papers. So, but anyway, it looks nice. Just finishing with that issue of quality, and sometimes people say that quality is something independent. It could be a high quality open access journal, and it could be a high quality subscription journal, and also low quality ones. But I think that there is a major difference. In the subscription model, there is an incentive for editors-in-chiefs to accept only high-quality papers, because the number of papers does not play any major role. But if there is a low quality of accepted papers, there will be lower subscription, the numbers of subscribers will be lower. But in open access, generally there is a pressure, at least with some publishers, a pressure on editors-in-chiefs to accept as many papers as possible. Of course, trying to keep some quality levels. So I think that this makes a difference, and we need probably a more detailed studies related to quality and the impact of open access on quality of accepted papers. Yeah, so maybe for the first question, that's enough. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next, I would like to ask Arend Kuster for the answer.
Sure, I'm unmuted. Hello, very nice to be here, and very nice to have this organization. And also, I'm really excited to work with NCN and on open access and open research. What we have found from a publisher side is that whatever we publish open access is almost like an intravenous shot into the research system. What we see, we get more citations, we get 4 times more downloads, we get more altmetrics attention and more news mention and more policy mention. So we can see that publishing open access has an immediate impact on advancing research and making research faster. I do want to say something very quickly to my previous speaker on the quality and the workflows on that immediately, because I mean, we can talk about the difficulties in different regions. I mean, I built a research publisher in the Middle East before joining Springer Nature. I think the last time I saw Johan face to face was in Beijing when I worked for Springer Nature in China. We need a general discussion on the transparency about the processes. Overall, our processes are pretty much the same, whether we publish open access or whether we publish subscription. We don't accept more papers just because there are all open access. And to put a real scale on it, if I got the numbers right, last year we had about 1 million submissions overall within Springer Nature, and I think we published 372,000 papers of that. All of those go through the same peer review standards, get reviewed, some in-house, some get assigned, get managed across the process. And of course, there are journals who have got a higher rejection rate. I mean, the Nature family of journals has got a very high rejection rate, which makes it very difficult to move it to its transformative status, which they all are now, and how we can transform some, if not all, to open access at the end of 2024. We'll see how that is going to go. And we need a general understanding worldwide that research is growing, publications are growing, but the status of open access in different countries is different, and we need to deal with misconceptions some of the researchers have around open access and open access publishing. Let's leave it at that for now.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to hear that, because generally I had exactly the same experience, that even publishing in Nature, I wasn't treated differently, and I had no feeling that the publication process looks different when open access is taken into account. The next, I would like to ask Sabina Leonelli.
Thank you very much, and it's a great pleasure to also be able to join you all for this discussion. So I guess I am here really to represent the research community, especially as somebody who is based in the humanities but works a fair amount with social scientists and have a lot of collaborations across the natural sciences. And one of the things I think that I would like to stress quite strongly is the importance of open access in really transforming the ways in which research is done, and the type of feedback and engagement that researchers engage in. So as was already mentioned, the ways in which research publications can engage different kinds of publics changes radically if we have an open access model. And this is something that is particularly important at a moment where, on the one hand, we recognize that we are facing global challenges where we need to bring together expertise from a variety of subjects, and also from beyond academia to be able to address these challenges. And I think the COVID emergency was obviously a very good example of this. You have to have transfer of understanding and knowledge across disciplines, across the humanities and the sciences, and also across academia and other sectors of society, so that you can actually address that kind of challenge. And is also, I think, an important counterpoint to a tendency within academia, especially to do hyper-specialized research. We have an ever-growing research community around the globe. Research fields get more and more specialized and focused, but sometimes this can become an issue when it comes to researchers actually engaging broader problems and being able to engage different kinds of publics and perspectives in their research. So I think in that sense, open access plays a very important role, both in fostering interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary research, but also in breaking the ivory tower problem. So really allowing researchers like me who work within academia to communicate our results in a more varied way to many different publics and get feedback from them and use that to improve what we're doing and to really think also about which topics we're going to be investigating. So because of this, my experience working with very different scholarly societies in research has been that researchers are very broadly, strongly supportive of the idea of open access. It's actually very rare to find a researcher that is ideologically opposed to open access or uncertain about making the results more widely available. Where the big reservations come for researchers are around the practical modalities, the barriers that there can be in practice to actually get work out in an open access format. And indeed, as was already mentioned, there are big questions around money and who is actually funding some of these efforts. And there are questions around how some of the long-term structures and quality assurance procedures that we have elaborated within the research community, like long-standing journals, will be able to survive and thrive in this kind of open access landscape. But I'm sure we'll come back to this question, so I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Marek Michalewicz.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And, welcome to all participants. First of all, maybe I will sort of list shortly my credentials why I'm in this panel. Open access is a rather new thing for me. I've only immersed in this topic fully about 4 years ago when I joined ICM at the University of Warsaw. And the ICM is extremely intensely involved in these activities in a number of areas. And I would like to list and separate them. Just a few days ago, we had a large conference opening of a new tool, new platform. It's called Open Science Platform, and that serves to make Polish journals accessible in open format. And there are already 1,300 titles of such journals. But this is rather local. That belongs to our sort of community of scientists, and mostly is published in Polish language. Separate from that, ICM has been involved for many years in providing licenses of commercial publishers such as Springer, Elsevier, Wiley, and several dozens others. Each year, almost, or every 3 years, ICM negotiates on behalf of Ministry of Education and Science contracts, these big deal contracts with the biggest publishers, and smaller contracts with society journals, with very large societies such as American Chemical Society or American Physical Society, and lots more. There are at least 30 contracts ongoing, which are managed by or supported by ICM. And of course, I have also experience of almost 40 years of being scientist and publishing. And in my capacity as the director of ICM, I also come in contact with publishers. So in any negotiations, one has to be fully aware of the interests of both parties. So in this context, we cannot neglect the other side. The other side, which is very often accused of being greedy. And what is an example of it? Elsevier is one of the companies with the highest margin of profit to revenue of the order of 40%. And that can be compared to Apple computers and a few other companies. And in comparison, since I also work in supercomputing and in hardware business, the margins are of the order of 1%. Dell computers, which produces most of the computers that people use in cloud and all over the place, and HP the same, they have those margins of the order of 1%. And they produce a real thing, whereas with article publishing, it's something that comes in the form of file, so soft copy, already pre-formatted very often. But then one has to also realize that publishers like Elsevier has been on the market for 400 years. They have started that sort of business. They enabled progress of science. So we have to also give credit to the other side. That's very important. Then as a physicist, I can support Professor Jeszczyk numbers because I have them listed here. Polish authors published last year close to 11,000 papers in those commercial journals outside of Poland. Out of that, we have ICM managed to enter into various transitional contracts to make a certain component of a certain portion of those published papers available in open access. And close to 4,000 papers have already been published in open access in commercial publishing houses. So that's the situation. Then I will return back to Professor Jeszczyk's argument about the numbers and the statement that 40% people barely understand what they read. I want to stress very strongly, top science is elitist pursuit. It's not for the masses. And I can give also a quantitative argument that I care very much that 1% of people in every country around the world have free access to all the published literature in science, then 40% of Poles can read it. Because that's 40% is really nothing in the world scene. So that argument, I think, is kind of in my mind doesn't stand. Sorry to say. And in general, so I gave a few very general numbers, but I'll also give an anecdote. I have several master's level students in computational engineering at ICM, and one of them, after 1.5 years of study at that level, published a paper at Computer Science Nature, Springer Nature. Within 1 month, his paper was read over 2,000 times. And I can assure that in my career, long career, 40 years, I never had a single paper that was read so widely in such a short time. Of course, fortunately, I was the co-author among few others, so that was also sort of my small success. But for my student who was just entering his career, to have that sort of exposure and reach is unprecedented. It never happened before. So as a scientist, as a person responsible for running an institute which in large measure serves to support science in various ways, in computing, in open science, in literature. I think open access is something valuable. There's no way out. And of course, we may discuss about the implementation plans, which are never perfect, but I think fundamentally and philosophically, this is absolutely brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the final speaker, Johan Urek.
Yes, thank you for inviting me. I mean, I represent Coalition S here today. And the reason Coalition S, of course, was set up was that the funders found that the transition towards open access was not going fast enough. If you looked at hybrid journals, for instance, over the last 10 years, you could see that the proportion of open access remained stable or even declined a little bit. And that's the subscription part of the hybrid journals was still very much in place. And we didn't think that was a good evolution, especially because, as Aaron says, open access articles are much more visible, much more cited, much more read by everyone. And so the funders of Coalition S wanted a better return on investment. Funders invest money into research. If you look at Coalition S, for instance, the total amount of Coalition S members that Coalition S members jointly invest in research annually is about 33 billion euros a year. That's not peanuts. And we publish jointly again about 150,000 articles a year out of that money. So the equation for Coalition S is quite simple. If those articles are in open access, they can have a much bigger impact. They can be read by many more people. I think it's the visibility and the accessibility that is really the key here, because we want to accelerate science. An article that is read more quickly, that is accessible more quickly, can be read by anyone, can be criticized by more people, can be built upon, can be developed. Would we really have had a vaccine had we not had articles in open access? Would we really have had efficient methods to treat the effects of of COVID had we not had open access? I think the answer is quite easy. And we have articles in open access, of course, not just for those Polish readers who do not wish to read, but we write for the rest of the world, right? I mean, we write for those hundreds of thousands of engineers that the Indian universities and the Chinese universities are churning out each year. We write for and publish for researchers in Latin America who don't have access to subscriptions, and in Africa who don't have access to subscriptions in the same way as we do in the North. So those are reasons to have open access. You never know where the next good idea is going to come from. It might very well come from that, brilliant young engineer who just graduated in Lahore, as easily as from someone in Poland or someone at Harvard. You don't know where the next good idea is going to come from, and that is why articles need to be in open access. As for the quality, I agree with what the previous speakers have said. I think the quality is basically the same in subscription journals or in open access journals. My personal opinion on that is also quite clear. I do believe that there needs to be distinction and actually an iron wall between the business side of publishing, the publishing services, so to speak, and the academic side of the publishing business. My personal belief is that if scientists have control over the academic side of publishing, so they control the desk rejections, they control the quality, the reviewing, without pressure from the publishing company, then they will be more concerned about their own reputation as editors than about serving the publishing company with more and more papers simply because of the bottom line. I agree with Arend that at major publishing companies this is not really an issue very often. I mean, they're also more interested in quality than in publishing the maximal amount of papers. But I do think that this is a persistent myth about open access that needs to be dispelled, namely the idea that because you pay a price per article, the quality is necessarily less. I see many more problems with paying a price per article than quality, which we can come back to later, perhaps in this meeting. But I'll stop here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. You know, it's more than a half hour left. So I'm pretty sure that we need to accelerate our discussion a little bit. Thus, maybe the second question, which was about, how open access changed the scientific process and knowledge in general. So, in many of your answers, these topics were referred. So maybe we could focus more about evaluation of science in this context. So, if I may ask our researcher here, Sabina Leonelli, if you can refer to that.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think actually, indeed, at least from a perspective of the research community, the question around how open access can be integrated into what is now the system for research evaluation is the key question. There is really no more relevant question for us, partly because right now we are very aware that in many scientific systems around the world, in many national systems, the assessment for what counts as excellent research depends on where people publish, very often on the impact factor, which relates to the venue of publishing rather than necessarily to the quality of the work that is being published. And this, of course, means that for now, we are in a system where there are huge incentives for researchers to publish in whichever journal is held up to be high impact factor and high esteem within their field, regardless of whether those journals are open access or not. And there is also, in fact, a strong disincentive, even for senior researchers, to try and prioritize open access venues if publishing in these venues could be seen to damage the career of earlier career researchers, young researchers, postdoctoral fellows or PhD students that we as senior researchers work with. So this is a really urgent issue. And we have had a very useful exercise within the European Union. 2 years ago, I participated in a so-called mutual learning exercise, where we brought together 13 different countries and representatives for 13 different European countries to try and discuss how this issue of research assessment could be resolved in a way that favors open science and open access, but also takes account of the big difference in assessment and in the goals of research that we find even just around Europe. And I think there's been substantive progress in that sense. I think many governments have become much more sensitive to the questions of trying to reframe our standards for research excellence so that they're not just tied to impact factor, but take account of many more metrics and very often also qualitative assessment of what the research work is doing. But at the same time, we are still in a transition moment where still many funders and many scientific institutions, including universities, are using traditional metrics to assess the researchers that they already have, so for promotions, but also to think about who to hire, so who has the right to be employed. And in fact, there are some systems, I know for instance in Italy, this is the case, where there are particular categories of research excellence associated to particular journals. And so only people who publish in certain journals, which are category A, say, get allocated a certain number of points, which will then be very important for these people to get jobs. Now, as long as this system is not integrated and somehow aligned with fostering open access research, we're really going to be in trouble, because even the many researchers, as I said, who are very interested in publishing their work in an open access format, unless that work is then recognized as much as work which may not be published in an open access format, then this is going to be a real disincentive for researchers to participate in this transition.
Thank you. Maybe I'd like to ask Andrzej, as a representative of funding agencies. So,
yeah. First of all, I would like to, before we answer the question, I have to say that I think one of the greatest advantages of open access that it facilitates a wide search, automatic search among various sources. So when we are thinking about, for example, digital humanities, and personally we are not able to read everything, but we can automatically search various sources, and open access definitely facilitates that. So it's a good side of the open access. As the funding is concerned, I would love to see a thorough study of cost models for both subscription model and the open access model. Because, for example, when we look at the open access model, such an example was given during the recent discussion about open access at the board of Polish Academy of Sciences that I participated in. The example was that there are around 100,000 researchers in Poland. If each of them publishes a single paper in open access, and the average cost is, say, 10,000 Polish zloty per paper, this means that per year, the only cost of open access is around 1 billion Polish zloty, which is roughly equivalent of the yearly budget of NCN, so Polish Research Funding Agency, and only for open access payments. So it sounds really dangerous. So we do need some thorough studies about cost models, just to get rid of pathologies when we have. And as evaluation is concerned, what Sabine told us is that evaluation based on points, based on particular articles, and those points are associated by ministry or some other bodies in every country or in some countries. And in Poland it works also pathologically, because on our list there are some open access journals of rather doubtful quality that are allocated a considerable number of points. And with one, I can say, predatory publisher, last year in Poland we spent 6 million Polish zloty, which is a substantial amount of money, just on Polish publications of Polish researchers in journals published by that publisher. And because of those point systems, so we have to think how to avoid that. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Marek, may I ask you mainly to refer to this cost model?
Yes.
Of open access?
Well, let me first say that for the last 2 years, I have also been invited by CRASP on behalf of Poland to represent Poland at the European University Association in Brussels as a member of a group, steering committee, which was tasked with producing a report on open science. And this group, which was represented by every country in the EU, produced, helped to produce a report which was published in July 2020, titled Read and Publish Contracts in the Context of a Dynamic Scholarly Publishing System. It's 90 pages of very, very good reading. And I really recommend everyone interested to know nitty-gritty of that problem, really basis and very, very thorough analysis of the situation, and including discussion of 4 different models of how to move on and get over this transitional agreement. So, and during this deliberations and meetings, we have insight into costs and the styles of discussion between publishers and representatives of various countries, so-called big negotiators or negotiators of big deals. I can give some numbers for Poland. I can give a lot of numbers for Poland, and it turns out that it's not too bad. In Poland, we have a system which is rather unique, actually. I may risk stating that we are the only country in the world which has got countrywide national licenses with those 3 major biggest publishers, with Elsevier, with Springer and Wiley. And those licenses give free access to members of communities of nearly over 500 different institutions in Poland. But during these negotiations, we have already started introducing transitional licensing and with prepayment. And for example, the numbers don't look as bad as we just heard, especially that with Springer. I can say that Springer is one of the publishers where they have gone the longest way to introduce a prepaid model. And in Springer, every Polish author, everyone who publishes in Springer, in any journal of Springer, is already prepaid. So there's no charges, direct charges to the institution, to the grantee agency, because the ministry has already paid for it. And typically, on the average, very evenly, Poles publish around just over 2,000 papers in Springer. We publish over 8,000 papers in Elsevier journals, and Elsevier is an extremely tough negotiator, I must say. We spent 4 months and 10 meetings to negotiate the latest agreement with them, to my great satisfaction, and I will say why. In that particular negotiations, we managed to secure 3,000 prepaid publications for Polish authors. But that's not out of 8,000. Since the model is so different, so new to publishers, they also need time, and every publisher goes a slightly different path. So with Springer, we had 500 prepaid publications in the first year, 1,000 in the second, 1,500 in the third. Over 3 years, 3,000 published. Hopefully, for the next round of negotiations, we'll sort of have this number much higher. And when we calculate the cost of access of the paper, if you go through this model, sort of a la carte model, and a la carte, and each individual researcher sort of buys a particular article from licensed journals, it costs around 30-40 euros. We have over 10 million or 20 million of that order, 10 to 20 million accesses or reads of those journals by Polish scientist students a year. And when we calculate how much it costs per article, it's €1. So the savings is about 40 times. And that's not so much related to open access to open science, but it's rather related to this negotiating power and the fact that we negotiate for all of the institutions in Poland. So that the savings is incredible. And one needs to realize that at the level of European University Association, we discussed things like combining bargaining powers of all the countries, not a single country. So now we have a very strong position as a country. Poland has got good position. But one might imagine that because of Plan S and future developments, dozens of countries can put a very strong representation on the negotiating table. The situation will change and the cost will change, because I don't think that it's necessary for a company to really survive on such a large profits. So that's my point of view.
Okay, thank you. My final question would be about the future of open access, so just save some at the end. Maybe now it's time to hear the voice from the publisher side. So Arend Kuster, if you'd like to refer to this.
Yeah, there are a couple of things which came up in this interesting discussion, and I do want to pivot back to the question of evaluation eventually. Just one thing I do want to say, and thank you for your analysis of the numbers, Marek. I actually remember in 2004, 2005, I negotiated the APS contract with you, with the American Physical Society. This was the first one I did in Poland. At this moment, the iron wall, which Johan mentioned, is as big as I don't know much about our commercial issues in Poland, because I don't work on the commercial side, I work on the strategic side. And I can assure you that the iron wall between the publishing and the editorial side is very well intact. One small thing I want to say about access to information. I'm not sure whether everybody in this room has heard about Research for Life. Research for Life is a collaborative a project by the STM industry as well, and we give access to low and middle income countries to our subscription information for free. So Springer Nature gives free access to our subscription journals to 80 countries in the world, which is at least something. And the question of equitable OA and making OA equitable is really a concern for us, and one thing we really want to think about, and one thing we have to think about. And I would also really invite all the funders to come in that discussion with us, because we need to work together on making this system equitable, because they say we've got free access to the subscription route, which we provide for them because we have the subscription to cover our cost. And at the same time, we also have last year waived millions of, literally millions of APCs to authors who couldn't afford APCs. So it's a tricky one. Going back to evaluation, we are as a company signatories of DORA, so we are subscribing to the research assessment without just looking at the impact factor, and we very much support that. In the journals we own, we were DORA compliant faster, but then not all the journals which we publish we own, because we publish some of the societies, so we had to bring them in and actually evangelize them on DORA as much as we evangelize them on anything which is open access and transformative journals, because we think that that is the future, the way we go. And the sooner we can address the problem of research evaluation on a European stage, the better, because that will be a worldwide stage very, very quickly. And anything we can do to support that through numbers, through cooperation, I think the door within my colleagues is wide open for any discussions around research evaluation. One other thing, maybe another aspect of open access, it has given us, and digital access has given us a way to also publish negative research and publish incremental research, and there are special journals for that. So one article on the recent pandemic, which recently got traction in Scientific Reports, which was just a statement on wild animal trade at the seafood market in Wuhan. And that has been cited quite a lot, but it was a incremental research article, and that is really important to have venues for those to come out as well. And the cost for us just to close that element down as well is not really to publish an article. The real cost is in the articles which we don't publish. We go through, we run through the system, who we evaluate, who we assign peer reviewers for, or we review in-house, desk rejecting, and so on. That is a huge amount of the cost in research publishing.
Thank you. And the last speaker, Johan.
Yes. Which question would you like me to answer? The one on evaluation or the one?
You can basically refer to what you think it is important, just to refer to our other speakers. But the main question was about the evaluation and the changes that are needed in evaluation process to support the open access implementation.
We have, yes, thank you. As you know, in PLANS we have a principle 10, which is exactly about research evaluation, right? Because we think it's the basic element that needs to change. I mean, it's been said before, there is this idea that certain venues, you need to publish in certain venues for your reputation, for prestige. Principle 10 addresses that and states very explicitly that we will, as funders, no longer take into account the prestige of the venue where authors publish, or or purely quantitative metrics, the number of articles they publish, or the journal impact factor of those journals. Those will be explicitly banned from evaluations of future projects by applicants. We have also a task force in Coalition S of experts, Coalition S experts, who exchange best practices about evaluating projects going forward. And so we are quickly establishing DORA and DORA principles and ONCOM principles as something that is essential in project evaluation. We also have a task force and work together with various early career research organizations like Global Young Academy, Marie Curie Alumni Association, and Eurodoc, to see what the impact is of PLANS and of this accelerated transition to open access on their careers going forward. Because, of course, very often these young researchers are totally in favor of open access, as Sabina has said, but they are evaluated by a generation of researchers who are 20 years older and not yet convinced of the advantages of open access, or not yet convinced of the fact that this prestige economy that the academic system now relies on should change, and is actually detrimental to the system. So that is what I would like to say about evaluation, and we hope, I mean, this is a long-term process, of course. It's not something that's going to be finished in a few years. It's going to take a mentality change. This is also what you refer to, Malgorzata, as the psychological aspect, I think, of open access. People need to change their mentality and adapt to a new world where quality will be evaluated rather than the prestige of the journal. And of course, we need new mechanisms for that, and we need to develop it. In that context, it's important to note that the European Commission is going to pay special attention going forward to research assessment. There's going to be a special program for that, if I understand correctly, from my colleague. So this is definitely a topic that's going to be left, right, and center of the open access agenda in the years to come.
Thank you very much. A very quick question. Now, I think it's important, if you have any knowledge about the open access and the difference in open access implementation across disciplines. that's maybe Sabina, you can refer to that.
Well, I think one of the key issues for differences between disciplines depends on, for instance, how much a certain discipline depends or relies on external funding. So that's actually a key issue in the implementation of Plan S, the fact that the vast majority of researchers covered by Plan S tend to be researchers in the natural sciences. And so as much as Plan S is making a lot of effort to try and reach out to researchers in the humanities and social sciences, the fact is, because these researchers don't rely necessarily for their work on external funding, then they cannot be covered by the provisions for open access that the funders are now making available. So they depend on that, basically depend on universities and on national policies, but not necessarily going through a funder. So that's a very important element. Another element, which is I think important, is that for similar reasons, in fact, many disciplines in the humanities and social sciences, especially qualitative social sciences, have a long-standing, dislike for quantitative metrics. They have been much more difficult to apply to the humanities and qualitative social sciences, which in fact makes these subjects potentially much better disposed towards adopting open access because they don't depend as much from calculations based on impact factor, at least not in some countries and in some frames of assessment. At the same time, I think it's important to note the humanities and qualitative social sciences have a very high estimate for some of their journals, their top journals. And I think this is partly a problem, and it belongs to what Johan was referring to, this prestige economy that is very, very important, particularly in these subjects, I would say. But I think it's also because there is a recognition that for many of the long-standing journals in these fields, there has been a huge amount of very often volunteering labor from researchers who are not really paid to be editors or referees or to help with the publishing and the peer review process, but have invested enormous resources on actually getting the quality of certain journals where it is today. And this has been to some extent appropriated, in some cases fostered by certain publishers. But I think for many researchers in those disciplines, there is a recognition that the kind of work and methods and investment that researchers have put into getting certain journals to a very high quality level shouldn't really get lost in the transition to open access. And I think this is recognized, but at least for certain disciplines, is really an important issue.
Thank you. Marek, would you like to answer that?
Well, I can say that there are certain disciplines like mathematics, which are traditionally very open, and there were cases where the entire editorial boards have sort of abandoned commercial publishers and moved on and established a very similar journal of the same quality outside of that's commercial circulation. But I have a paper here, Oligopoly of Academic Publishers in the Digital Era, 2015, where there's analysis of consolidation of journals, because as we've noted, that the new journals and new societies are being absorbed under the umbrella of the largest publishers. And it turns out that social sciences, 70% of all published papers in social sciences are under 5 major publishers, whereas medical sciences and natural science and mathematics, physics, somewhere in between. And so these are the numbers. Humanities, it's only 20% of that. So humanities traditionally are outside of the grasp of the largest publishers. But if I'm allowed to say a few words, because I believe that publishers are, we have to appreciate their value in our life, in the life of academic research. They are a couple of steps ahead of us. Here's an example. If you look at the web page of Elsevier, they don't label themselves publisher anymore. Look at what it says. It says that Elsevier is an information analytics business. So think about it. It's not about publishing papers. It's about text mining and analysis of enormous number of texts at the same time. So, for example, at ICM next week or within next couple of weeks, we will be rolling out a tool called Taxila from Tokyo Systems Biology Institute, which allows artificial hypothesis generation based on thousands or millions of papers. There's a very good case at Taxila or at SBI, Systems Biology Institute site, where at the time of COVID pandemic, the publications related to COVID are open by default. And then they can do analysis on text, taking millions of abstracts, but with full collections, you can imagine that you will be able to drill into the text, full text, to all the keywords, and also to relations between the authors, to dependencies between the institutions, and also you could take a snapshot at, let's say, 5-year period of publication, and out of that 5-year period, you can extrapolate synthetic hypothesis, scientific direction, so you can define new pursuit, new directions of research based on previously published papers. But you have to have a very wide access. So the one who has got the full text has got incredible power, plus, of course, those very modern tools. And we don't talk much, we talk about publishing, sort of like a process of making your results available. But we should really, really start talking a lot about what you do when you have the access to this enormous wealth.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, very quickly. Not every publisher sees himself or herself as a data analytics company. We do see ourselves still as a publisher for quite some time and trying to create products where the researchers would like to publish with us. And that's our core business.
Thank you. I'm not sure if you, Andrzej, or you, Johan, would like to refer to this topic. If not, because we are...
just a single sentence.
Okay.
If possible. Yeah, just a single sentence or two. I'm not worried about the differences in open access between disciplines. That's natural. But I'm a little bit worried about the differences in the pace of implementation of open access policies in different regions, especially between Europe, the United States, and China. Because it might happen that just pressing for a very fast implementation of, say, very deep open access policies in Europe could place us, as the European Union, or researchers from the European Union, in a, say, inferior position to some other regions. So this is my concern. Thank you.
A very important point, and I'm sure that Johan would like to respond on that.
I'm not sure I understand. How would that put us at a disadvantage?
I could explain. Yeah, it's you know, if possible, just briefly. Let's imagine a young researcher from, say, China or India, who finished his PhD degree studies in his or her own country, and then looks for a postdoctoral position, and having in mind just a view of further career, and he or she knows that if he or she applies for a position at top universities, for example in life sciences, he or she should publish in one of those hybrid journals. Because it's, for some of them it's pretty obvious. So they could choose the postdoctoral position in the US where there is, he or she has no problem with publishing in a hybrid journal, avoiding European institutions because that person could think that, in Europe, I can have a problem if I don't have proper financing, for example, to pay for open access. Yeah. So this is just an example. Yeah.
There is perhaps a misunderstanding then. Because, I mean, we allow authors to publish in hybrid open access journals. There is no problem. We just don't pay for it. And one way of getting around the payment for publication in hybrid open access journals is to apply the rights retention strategy. So an author can perfectly publish behind the paywall if they assert the rights retention strategy and assert a CC BY license on the AAM arising from their submission, and then deposit a copy of the AAM in a repository. So there is absolutely no problem. I mean, Plan S does not put any restrictions on the type of journal you can publish in. You just have to follow a certain number of rules to publish there, that is all. But it is not dependent on payment. So that Chinese researcher would be perfectly fine publishing a copy of the AAM in a repository on publication of the journal behind the paywall. But at least that AAM would be available in open access. So, but there would be no disadvantage for the researcher in question.
Thank you. Okay, I've got information that we don't have many questions, so final question to you, just final thoughts, but more specifically I would like to ask you about your opinion about the future of open access. What do you think about the model? Is there a single model that we should be dominant, or was there all universities, publishers, research funding agencies in supporting the open access? So just try to summarize our discussion, and maybe I would start from Johan.
Yes, I think the future of open access, at least the immediate future of open access, is multiple. I mean, that is also why Plan S adopts various roads towards open access. We pay APCs in gold open access journals, even if we think that the APC is inherently unfair because it is the same price all over the world. And waivers really are not the way forward because they're basically handouts to lower and middle income countries. So what we need is a different kind of pricing. We allow also the green route, depositing, if you can publish in a subscription journal, but then you have to publish a version of the AAM in a repository. And of course, we also support transformative agreements. The future, the way we see it, let's say 5 to 10 years from now, is a world in which publishers make deals with very large consortia, and these deals are pure publish deals. We no longer pay to read, we pay to publish. We pay for a specific service, namely making that, evaluating the article and making the article available online. That is a service that we should be paying for. That is not a problem at all. But we need to move to a completely different model of publishing, I think, where authors and editors are much more in charge of their own journals, and that there is a clear division between, let's say, the publishing side of the business and the quality control side of the business, which should be really in hands of the researchers, in my view.
Thank you. Sabine?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I couldn't agree with Johan more on this. I think indeed we are looking at a proliferation of open access models, given the way the situation is, so the huge disparities between access in different countries and the ways in which this tallies with evaluation. This is really necessary at the moment. But I think there is a lot of concern among researchers around potentially open access becoming, first of all, an exclusionary system, where some people in certain countries or in certain disciplines are actually excluded from some of, for instance, the transformative agreements that are being brokered at the moment. I think we've already heard from our panelists, there are, of course, advantages towards having country-level agreements around a certain number of papers being released, open access by certain publishers. At the same time, there are constant questions around what happens when the requests from researchers exceed those kind of numbers within that country. It certainly is happening all the time that I can see here in the UK, even at my own university, the request to public open access by people who are funded in that respect through the transformative access or the APC model are usually far exceed the budget that the university has available to try and support this. So there are decisions made about who, in fact, is allowed to go ahead and publish open access and who isn't. The This is a constant issue. And I think it's really, there are concerns around the fact that these transformative agreements and the agreements also countrywide with particular publishers are actually having the effect of locking in the publication systems in academia to particular venues and particular publishers. Because of course, once there is an agreement, say with Springer or with Elsevier, with my university, for me to publish for free and be read for free with that publisher, I don't have an incentive to publish with any other publishers because the incentive is all to publish with these particular venues. And this has all sorts of implications in terms of then which journals are being supported and which not, and how we're thinking about the future of open access. So I think, Coalition S has just released now a wonderful study, which I strongly recommend to read, on the so-called diamond model. So what are journals doing who are trying to provide articles free to read, but also without asking authors to pay for their services, and how we can extend that model and do that without sacrificing the services of publishers and the expertise of people who are specialized in publishing. And I think all the researchers' eyes are really on these kinds of models at the moment, because they seem to be potentially the only sustainable ones which may not damage the research environment.
Thank you very much. Aaron?
Oh gosh, how much do we have? That's quite a lot.
Just final thoughts, and maybe we can back to you later.
Exactly. We definitely see the future is in open access. I certainly do not think that neither the diamond road or the green road are sustainable, because one of them needs the subscription system to a model, and I know that Johan and I probably disagree on that, but we probably have to take the discussion somewhere else. Let's say maybe on the diamond model, because it needs people. We need to understand without ideology that what we do requires people to do work, and people can't do the work for free. They control that. Even if they do the peer review, that's a complete other issue. And I recommend the latest article on the Scholarly Kitchen on that. It is real work being done, which people want to have their livelihoods on, and we need to understand that we all have a role to play for it, whether it's commercial publishers, whether it's the so-called not-for-profit publishers who usually have a surplus they want to reach, but also the funders and the universities and the research communities coming together. How can we make this sustainable in the long term in a fair way? And transparency on all sides is, of course, key to that.
Thank you. Marek?
Yes, maybe thank you for all the very important and insightful comments before. One of the issues, first of all, I think open access, open publishing will be here. There's no way back from that. It will take several years, and as it was noted, we have to explore many different possible models. We do have to study price models, cost models, definitely at every step. But talking about that, we have sort of transient problems, very big problems in many countries, not only, but especially I'm concerned with Poland, that the cost of open access publishing is taxed at 23%, and the cost of reading only is 8%. So basically, we are punishing ourselves for exporting our science. It's ridiculous. And I've already sort of drafted a letter, which we plan to send to the Minister of Education and Science, signed already by and endorsed by NCN and Polish Academy of Science. And now I'm waiting for endorsement from NCBR and from our rector. When that's ready, that's a very major issue. And we have numbers. If we pay for the license and access to journals around $250 million zlotych annually, this 23 versus 8% makes a very, very large number. Thank you.
Thank you. And Andrzej?
Yeah, I think I do agree that there is no way back probably from open access, but we have to resolve some issues. Arendt mentioned the initiative Research for Life, just paying for subscription in low-income countries. So I think that we have to develop a method to help those researchers from low-income countries to publish in open access, because in some countries it's simply not possible to cover those costs. So we need a system to help those people. So I think that's important. And I also would like to stress the importance of, say, good publishers, because sometimes in the framework of open access, some people claim, oh, we can put our work, our article in any place, in any open access repository, and it doesn't matter that it goes through a process in a journal. It is a wrong way, because the publishers, good publishers, ensure quality and the reviewing process. Because if we don't do that, we'll be flooded with billions of low quality and hardly readable papers. So it would make a life of other researchers reading those papers more difficult. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we have 15 minutes for questions. I'm not sure if we can see them. So if not, maybe I give the voice to our.
We will try to encourage you to use the chat function. It's just click the chat, enter your question, press enter, and there you are. We have two unofficial questions which came to our panelists from outside the chat. Please let me read them. One of them is probably prompted by Sabina, who mentioned liberation of scientific literature. And is there some literature on the rogue part of the internet, kind of darknet, like, I don't know, university news leaks or university papers leaks? And does that play any role in research, either damaging it or opening to those young students you mentioned? Because in some other parts of life, this is a very serious problem with, as all problems, pros and cons.
Thank you. Anybody would like to answer?
I mean, I can certainly just briefly say that, yes, I mean, I'm certainly aware of many researchers around the world who rely on databases with pirated material to try and access publications which are published by subscription journals, which they have no access to. So yes, I mean, I think that's certainly something to be factored in when thinking about potential access. I think this is something that already with the idea of trying to put as much of the literature as possible on repositories in the kind of accepted manuscript version, we are trying to address. So more and more there is an incentive for scholars to, and actually the opportunity for scholars to put their work, even if it's not in the definitive version, copy-edited version, out there in preprints. But of course, that doesn't necessarily address this problem either, because typically these manuscripts are less easily searchable, less maybe visible to people who are not really within that particular academic community. And so I think the problem remains.
Marco?
Who are interested in that topic, I recommend a 1-hour movie. You can find it on internet. It's called Paywall. And it describes not so much sort of darknet publishing, but darknet accessibility to the entire collections of scientific literature, which and lots of people unfortunately are using it, and maybe fortunately, because that's the way to access new knowledge, but that's the fact. So Paywall.
That's right, and it is a film that is really worth seeing. And as far as I remember, it is Creative Commons, so you don't commit an offense watching it somewhere online. Speaking of Creative Commons and speaking of intellectual property rights and their protection, is there some kind of progress there, something that helps, that really supports the development of open access scientific literature, scientific publications, or are we still very much 19th century patents, copyright, and all the World Intellectual Property Offices and UIPOs? Do they help?
It is probably a question to Arend. Maybe you'd like to comment?
I do want to say something before as well, because one of the reasons these black open access or dark open access elements come up, I know the first one is not what we use anymore, is that we have made it way too hard for researchers to access our information when they're not on campus. And especially during the pandemic, we have done an incredible amount of work from our colleagues from customer service to implement seamless access so that the researchers who couldn't get into their institutions anymore would have access to the literature from their home. And I think that has addressed many of the issues. In terms of intellectual property, with open access, we largely refer to the CC BY license, and we apply that to the version of record, and the version of record is something which we actually manage. So there can be situations when the version of record is questioned or whether it needs amendment, and in extreme form needs retractions around it. So it's not an endpoint for us. It's something which we manage, where we have the current part available and keep it available, and that under open access terms we make available under the CC BY license, which is the best license for that to be used.
Absolutely, absolutely. Creative Commons CC BY number 40, I believe, unless we're already into 50, is something that I really love. And everyone who quotes me is supposed to use my name and perhaps also email address, then I am contacted. I'm not paid, but they have to pass on the credit to the author.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Oh, yeah. There is a question from Leszek Szafrański, who is responsible for open access at Jagiellonian University. I know that. The question is, what do you think? How open access should be promoted so researchers understand how it works? Not sure who wants to. Oh, please.
Yeah,
Arend.
I can do that.
Okay, Arend, go on.
I've done 2 years of intensive roadshows in China promoting open access and explaining how open access works, and going into the research communities and having clinics and talk how these work. And I think we need to reach out to the communities. We need to do a lot of educating, and I think that's something where we actually can come together quite easily on that as well, and explain how it works and why it is important. And I know that this sort of thing works.
Thank you, Marco.
Yes, again, I will be talking about my own institute. We are engaged in such education, and very, very intensely. There's about 30 people working on this projects of open science and open access Platforma Nauki. And they regularly, of course, that was slowed down by COVID, but nevertheless, they go almost bi-monthly or monthly to all places around Poland and educate it. And one important thing is that also in our deals, the license that we sign with publishers, there are always components of education and outreach. So it's not just access and walk away, that's it. there is a certain kind of relationship, including various workshops, even about the quality publishing, how to submit, how to write a very good paper that will be accepted, and various other, including open access. So they are regularly given at major universities around Poland. So that's plus, of course, there's something that we have not even touched. We talk only about articles, but there are also books. And the books are very costly, much more costly to produce as well. And it just happens that, for example, in Poland, we have almost 150 or 60,000 books in open access through this national license. Entire collection of Springer is available from the very beginning of this publishing society. Everything until last year, excluding 2016. We're still negotiating money for 1 year collection. But it's 160,000 books. And Polish authors write quite a number of books with Springer.
Thank you. Anybody would like to just add something?
Yes.
Go on.
Yes, I do think that, in fact, there should be more educational materials. There are some out there, but it's certainly not enough. I mean, as an editor, for instance, of my own journal, Glossa, Glossa is a journal that publishes all articles CC BY in open access. It's a diamond journal. But I get authors who will ask me afterwards, after publication, 2-3 months, can I reuse parts of my publication? Can I can I reuse graphs or illustrations? And then I have to tell them, well, look, I mean, your article is in CC BY. That means that you can reuse it as you see fit. So they are so indoctrinated, I would say, by the traditional system of copyright, where they sign over their own property to the publisher, that they think this is the default. Whereas, in fact, the default should be that the author is the owner, the rightful owner of that article. So we do need more education about CC BY, we need more education about open access. And it's great to hear that Arend went on a mission in China. But I do think we need missions, similar missions in our countries, in Europe, in the rest of the world, because even if you think that people understand what CC BY means, in fact, they don't.
We are working on it, Johan.
Yes, we do what we can.
Okay.
But this is an offer. I mean, if you need someone to come explain Plan S, for instance, or what we do at Coalition S, or various policies, I'm always available to come talk about it.
Great, thank you. Andrzej, Sabina, about promotion of open access.
Yeah, we do need promotion and we do need education. I think that there are many sources now, many initiatives, conferences. I recently attended several of them, just explaining the ideas or discussing the ideas of open access. Yeah, so, but we need more. Yeah, that's simple. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I would agree, and I would also remind everybody, I'm sure you know this, but we have really abandoned the idea of linear model of education and outreach in research. So I think I completely agree on the need for outreach and engagement of researchers in this as much as possible. And as much as possible, it should be a two-way system, so get feedback from researchers on how the open access landscape needs to develop.
Thank you. And last question from somebody. For all panelists, what do you think about how open access could help us to keep track of the production of scientific knowledge in the years to come? For example, having experts at big public libraries which have an overview over certain topics, scientific subfields, or using machine learning, which was already mentioned. I've noticed that Marek would like to answer that.
Yes, I've touched upon that topic because this certain scientific fields grow exponentially. It's just impossible for individual researchers to keep track of all the developments. In COVID research, there's maybe several 100,000 papers already. In some fields, there's incremental change of 100,000 or more plus every year. But there are some tools, various tools at various levels. There's machine learning, artificial intelligence, graph methods, semantic methods with various ontologies, which are being developed. I mentioned one such tool, and it's Taxila. First of all, I don't believe that it's possible to maintain experts at such level as the person asking this question would expect. It's impossible. It's just too costly, and in a certain sense, for an expert of that caliber, it would be a kind of waste of time on his part. So I really believe in automated and computer-based methods. And for one may think of methods developed by IBM with the Watson project. And if you read back that one of the purpose was to aid diagnosticians in providing accurate assessment of condition of the patient. And again, in medicine, that's a very good field that the practitioners doesn't have time. After completing studies, they don't have time to read so much. And again, accumulation of new knowledge is faster than anyone can absorb. So of course, we must rely on automatic systems. So IBM Watson system is one example. There's a very intense research at IBM labs in Zurich. As I mentioned, Taxila, there's lots of, but also there are tools already accessible through publishers. For example, Scopus and the Web of Science and various tools that are being developed by publishers already are having that sort of features that one can at least look through the field and explore. They're not ideal yet, and there are lots to be desired to add to the features, but that's the way it will be developing.
Thank you very much, and yeah, our session is finished, almost finished. So let me thanks all our guests. That was extremely important discussion and extremely interesting and vividly, I have to say, because I asked for a vivid discussion. Yeah, and I'm looking forward to meet all of you in face-to-face situation. And I would say that it was promotional, educational event. So it is also the question to Leszek Szafrański how to promote open access. Thank you, all of you, and thank you, our audience.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank all the participants, at least sixfold, because there have been 6 of them, and I believe that all the subjects discussed and the depth would be enough for at least a year's course for graduate students, and that probably would not be even exhaustive. Unfortunately, this is where our agenda ends. And so we are saying farewell, ladies and gentlemen, from the magnificent city of Kraków, where, by the way, I believe with Professor Jaśczyk we had an opportunity to work with Lawrence Lessig, the man who created the Creative Commons. It was still version 2.0.3.0 coming at the time. So do come to Kraków. This is a place where many things happen, not only in Zurich, like with IBM. And thank you for being with us. If you have learned half of what I have, then you can call yourself definitely a man or a woman having had a fruitful day. This is sadly where our meeting ends, the meeting with EEA and Norway Grants and the National Science Center Poland. The projects go on, not only the ones that have been mentioned, but all the other ones. And the National Science Center still consumes the funds from EEA and Norway Grants and does that with profound gratitude. Therefore, let me once again thank the donor countries on behalf of us, that is the beneficiaries. Let me thank for the hard work and plentiful effort all the people of the NCN from whose command center I say to you goodbye. May the force be with you. Do widzenia.